Okay. The year was 1972, and in June, the Democratic Party headquarters in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. was broken into. Republicans downplayed it as a third-rate burglary attempt, no big deal. Richard Nixon was the president. More than 40,000 American troops had died in the increasingly unpopular war in Vietnam. Nixon was continuing to pursue the war, but with a twist. He was phasing down U.S. troops and moving toward ending the draft. There was a Democratic presidential candidate, a guy named George McGovern, who had dreams of winning the November election, ending the war in Vietnam. Militant members of the Black Panther Party were involved in shootouts with the police. Usually the Panthers lost and died. Meanwhile, there were two causes that were up and coming. They were called gay liberation and women's liberation. And they continued to gain ground in the year 1972. Young people who were opposing the war in Vietnam and who tended to support movements for social change kept doing what they'd been doing for several years, growing their hair long, marching in protest demonstrations, and being involved in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was in that setting, 1972, that a fairly small event was planned just east of the OSU campus, just east of High Street on 16th Avenue, near something called the Wesley Foundation and the UCC. And it's happened once a year ever since. And today we're going to explore how that first community festival happened and why. Our guests are two of the several organizers of that first event, Julie Boyland and Burt Cantrell. So we're going to try to have a conversation here, and if you've got some comments too, we'll try to get you in on it. Burt Cantrell, real briefly, how did this thing start out of nothing?
I think we need this other mic pepped up a bit, which Bill has now. It wasn't working. Anyway, I was on a cruise once because I had to go on a cruise. I didn't want to go on a cruise, but it's the only way to see the inside passage in Alaska, unless you have a good kayak and want to kayak 1,000 miles. On that cruise, we had a chance to go down to the engine room. And I kind of feel that this is like the engine room. You know, not very many people here, but it's little groups like this that start things. And I came to the Wesley Foundation, which was a church-owned building. It's still there. It has become an official church now at the corner of Waldeck and 16th. The building was empty when I came there in August of 1971. A few very churchy type groups, Methodist groups mainly, met there. And I was trying to bring the community in. I was new to the place. I had come there from Youngstown State University, where I had been a kind of a radical guy, and I, for example, was the main speaker at the moratorium, if you remember that, back in those days. And they knew the kind of guy I was when they hired me from Youngstown State. I had kind of revolutionized a few things there. We came up here, we were looking to make commitments, connections with the community. Some of you remember the name Larry Rica. I haven't mentioned him before you, or you knew Larry. One day Larry Rico walks into our empty building, which I'm trying to fill, and we got to talking. He knows people in the community. The next thing, Julie Boyland and Bill Boyland and the Schwartz Walters and Steve Abbott, people like that are coming in. The first thing we know, a community that was already out there has a location. They have a place. I believe it was T.S. Eliot called the still point in a turning world. And this was kind of like that for that particular little world. It was a place to come. All I did was enable, which, by the way, is no small thing when you're paying the utilities. But we furnished that building. We were open. And I think perhaps the main thing I can say to anybody that's organizing with any kind of church group, educational group, any other social group, if you can trust the people and simply open it up to let them do their thing. You don't have to lead everything. Amazing things can happen if you don't care who takes the credit and so forth. And I'm getting tapped on the shoulder here. I'm used to talking either 50 minutes in a classroom or 20 minutes in a pulpit.
Okay, so Burt makes a good point here. The Wesley Foundation became the focus of all kinds of groups. The tenants union, there was a food group, there was feeding the poor, all sorts of things happening there. Julie Boyland, so what? So there was a building with a lot of community activity. So how did we wind up with a ComFest out of it?
Well, they were just working. But there were a lot of things that that happened that brought us along to Burt, and there was so much unsettlement during the 70s when the war. What we felt was, and it was true at that time in Columbus, Ohio, there was really, we didn't have a very fair deal with the Columbus Police Department. It was not going, can you hear me? It wasn't going very well, and with the war and the poverty and unequal treatment and women's rights, we finally decided that we needed to unite. And by that time, I think we already had the co-op. It wasn't operating out of Wesley yet. In fact, it was just sort of hanging out there, picking up orders on High Street from Longs, right? And then people came in, and we had their orders all bagged, so that all they did was pick them up and pay. And all these go, hi, that's my son Ian, and my daughter-in-law, hi Jenny. So anyway, there was this great need, and we were all out there. We said, well, here we are. What are we going to do? Where are we going to house ourselves? And voila! Not only did we get housing, but we got a room for tenant union and the community cooperative. And then the whole basement was just cement. And they let us use it. It was a pit. Yes, it was. Hi, Dottie. And then, we went. Or they didn't. We didn't have anything to do with it. The church went in and finished that whole room so that we now had a distribution area.
Can I just tell you one little thing there? We had an endowment at the Wesley Foundation. Funding was short in the church. They said that next year they were going to make us eat our endowment. And I said, hey, we'll eat it first. We put about $10,000 in it.
So then one day, I guess, we had all these organizations kind of together. But we weren't functioning as a union. We put community union together. That started to happen. We decided that we were including artisans and other people in the community, and so we decided that we needed to have a little street fair. And I think there were probably about, 10 people gathered under that tree. And the only people I
big sycamore tree in front of the building.
I know, I keep saying, but
lots of shade, and people just sat around there on the steps.
And it was Cindy Forrest, both the Forstags, Bill Boyland and me, Nick Calderone, who was the person who initiated the food co-op, Libby Gregory, both the Mendenhalls, Rosie and Daryl.
Sue Urbis.
Of course, Sue Urbis. And, we argued back and forth, but, we always had to come to a consensus, which we did. Which we did. And we decided to have this party. But then we had to hit somebody to agree to have it. And we went, gee, wouldn't this be fun, Burt?
Come to our house.
Send the spider to the fly.
So let's talk about that for a second. Burt, you were a minister, so you had some, I don't know what the right word is, legitimacy. Obviously you weren't an establishment guy, but yet you had some legitimacy. You helped to get this thing. I mean, if it weren't for some people who wore coats and ties once in a while or had a clerical collar or something, maybe this thing might not have happened if it was just a bunch of long-haired kids, no? I mean, didn't you help in that sense?
I had a 4-star pedigree. I went to Ohio Wesleyan and Yale Divinity School. I came out with all the good degrees. I was known as that kind of guy. I had done this great program at Youngstown State, if I say so. I came in second for a job at Columbia University. And my wife said, I don't want to raise my kids on the streets of New York. And then I got hired at Ohio State. And I had, some clout with my bishop and so forth because of that. And that helped a lot because they trusted me and they thought he knows what he's doing. He's not a flake. But I also had a board of trustees, that I was able to manipulate. And that's always important. And we had a great building, and Lloyd Whitey, the associate minister who had been there forever, a lot of you remember Whitey, and the thing just took off. But again, the community did it. But it was, if there was anything as a minister, and I was, I guess, and still am sort of a radical minister, but it was having the faith in the people and the belief that God isn't out there somewhere, God's right in here. See, it's among us. It's that spirit which is in us, that spirit of love. And allowing people to express that in many different ways. You look at all the things around here, and all the stuff that's growing out, all the political views, all the views on sexuality and race and what to eat, what to listen to. I walked in here today, the brass band of Central Ohio is playing. I walked over to another stage and there's a bagpipe group. I thought, my God, and I say that in the theological sense, my God.
What about the police now? How did the police,
Okay.
the relations between the students and the police were
Right.
not great in 1972. There had been big anti-war protests, a lot of arrests, beatings, tear gas. So what happened when you guys proposed a community festival to the police?
Well, I wish Steve Abbott were here but I think I can do the whole thing. Originally we were having a lot of difficulty getting permits from the city, and then once we did, from the first festival, we didn't need any police because, it was just like a little street fair. I mean, no beer, no nothing, card tables and whatever. By about the third festival, this one, I want you to see the map. Can you see that map? That was the entire, grounds for the community festival. There it is, 16th Avenue, just one page.
But that intimacy was good.
Oh, I know. So anyway, Bill Boyland at that time had been representing a group of Columbus police officers, African-American police officers, who felt that they had been denied promotion because of the color of their skin. So, they sued and won. And they formed their own group called Police Officers for Equal Rights. And so we decided that we were only going to hire, once they said you will have to hire police officers, we said fine, but they have to be members of Police Officers for Equal Rights. And so it went really well. And then about the time we moved down here, we got really big. Now remember, the biggest festival we had on 16th Avenue was probably 6,000 or 7,000 max. So they finally said, well, you're discriminating. Community festival, you're discriminating because you're only using black police officers. I mean, what a catch-22 that was. So we had no choice, but we still, were able to hire police officers who were at least sympathetic to the whole movement. So that's how we got, the police that would stay on the perimeter and not bother us.
We should add there the sanitation people and the parks people. Mel Dodge, who was head of the parks at that time, these people were very helpful. And they brought us those great big green trash drums, and they brought us picnic tables. In fact, Mel Dodge, after the festival, said you can keep the picnic tables. And there on the front porch of Wesley, we had about 6 picnic tables.
Well, I told Mel Dodge that I was going to chain my 2 children to the trees. And there they are. One of them sitting right here. I said, I will chain my children to the trees until you guys decide that you're going to be a part of this. Well, of course I wasn't. He was looking at me. Oh no, he said, I know my mom probably did that. Of course I didn't have to chain them, but it worked. And I didn't mean it, but I meant it. I didn't mean it, but I meant it. So I didn't have to chain you, Ian. Aren't you glad? That time I didn't chain that time.
Let me ask you this, how would you describe the vibes in that first community festival? It was a lot smaller. Was it a positive feeling? Was there a lot of tension and negativity because groups pushing for social change were struggling? I mean, how would you say what were the vibes?
I would say, frankly, that the vibes were always pretty pleasant. I will say this, as the resident minister in charge of the Wesley Foundation, there were times when I was thinking, what the hell have I done? I remember walking into the men's restroom at the end of the hall down from my office. Bob Ream here remembers. And I walk in there, and there's two tall black guys. And it is relevant to say that they happen to be black guys, and about 6'2", and they're changing into women's clothing. And I looked at them. 1,000 things went through my mind. I said, "Hi, how you doing?" I went over to the urinal, took care of my business, and walked out. And that, was kind of a turning point in a way, because if you're a Methodist minister, you walk into your own bathroom and there's two black guys changing into women's clothing. You have a moment of confrontation there where you could go either way. And I was very cool with it. And, but I'll say this, the community kept the, they kept the drugs, anything like that, out of our building, which was essential because, if it had turned into a pothead haven of some sort, I would have had people clamp down on me. Let me just say one other thing. Of all the battles I ever fought in that place, it was welcoming homosexuals into the building. And the fact is now, gays are welcome in almost every church in that area of town anyway, certainly the downtown churches. But, we were the first, Bob, to welcome gay people into our building. They had a meeting there that called in national people from other campuses. You remember that? And they said it was meeting at the Wesley Foundation. I got into all that started the tradition of saying 82 West 16th Street. When you put a poster up, you said 82 16th instead of the Wesley Foundation. That way I got into less trouble. Because somebody tore a poster down, sent it to their pastor out in Bellefontaine or someplace, and he wrote the bishop and all this crap,
Let me ask this. I know that I've read a statement of principles, it says, in the ComFest. Things like necessities of life, food and shelter are everybody's right. That's a pretty powerful political statement. Was that in the first ComFest thing, or was that added later? In other words, was there a kind of a set of political beliefs in general that was the heart of ComFest, or not? Did that not start till later?
Yeah, no, there was from the get-go, a purpose. I mean, it was party with a purpose, and we still use that to party with a purpose.
We were all anti-war and anti-Nixon.
Well, that was the big problem. That was the war. But it was, that we needed to, that everybody was about treating people with dignity. No matter what their race, no matter what their sexual preference was, no matter what, and peace. And when we get together, no matter what, if there were differences, when we had that weekend festival, you left those at home. You just left you left that baggage somewhere else. And you came, and you learned, and you grew. And that was what we were doing. Poor little Ian, it was just, the poor little kid. We had a van that my husband had, that his father had converted so that there were beds in there, and my poor children, they'd be partying, and then we'd take bedtime, and off to the van they went, which was in the parking lot of the Wesley Foundation. So my children would spend all weekend, they were little at the ComFest, so they really grew up with it, but they grew up with that same feeling of the festival is about sharing, loving, caring, and that's why I think we were all so upset that there was, for the first time, something that was unfortunate that happened last night. Yeah, we've had some fights, but nothing, because it's been so peaceful. So anyway, when I look at how the ComFest started, when I look at 16th Avenue and this map that I showed you of this little area, and I think about it, reflect on the groups who were there and what the initial intent was. And I look at this and I go, oh God, how did we get to this? I mean it. You know, it's not that comfortable, warm, fuzzy. But the exception is that we really have stuck with what we intended. We were the first festival ever to totally recycle. And we've done it since the very first festival. When they come in here on Monday morning, this place will be immaculate. You know, we are the first festival and the only festival that still relies totally on volunteers. Nobody gets paid. Nobody. And thirdly, I know there was a third.
Well, we had great security, and that was one thing.
Oh yeah, we do our own
Sue
security.
Urbis did.
Yeah.
We got to remember Sue
And
Urbis.
Sue, unfortunately, Sue was the heart and soul of security at this festival.
Not
And-
tough security, just firm
Yeah.
and right and
And she
fair.
passed away about 3 months ago. So
There's one thing I want to say, Julie.
They're
We meant-
dropping.
the question was about, started out about political views and things. Everybody was always welcome to pass out their literature. You know,
except they had to have a table, they had to have a booth. They weren't allowed to walk around.
well, that's right.
They were
had
not
to have
allowed
a
to
booth.
walk around.
But I remember, you know, the Communist Party was
Yep.
there, and everybody. They're still here. The communists are still here. I saw their booth, and I mean, communists, I guess, aren't controversial anymore. They're kind of passé, kind of so 19th century.
The
Sort of.
Russians are coming, the Russians are coming.
They're historical relics, I guess. But yeah, they're still here, and they were there then. They were controversial then.
Bert's already given us one example of a very vivid memory he had there in the Wesley Foundation restroom. I'd like to invite, if anybody else has a real vivid memory of one of the very early ComFests.
I might say I remember people
Margaret
nursing in my office, and I remember a girl standing up and squirting me with her breast.
If somebody has a real vivid memory and they want to come up and shout it into the mic, that'd be great. You know, early ComFest memories, yeah.
Well, the first memory I have of the first festival was I wasn't there because I was in jail. So, and while I was in jail, everybody went out and actually became a festival, getting money from people to help us out. And my bill was $100,000, and I thought, yeah, I'd go downtown, write my name, and come back. I was in solitary for an entire week. But during that time, the people who were putting ComFest together worked tirelessly to get us out. We got lawyers that did it for free because they believed in what we did. So then I started developing better memories of ComFest, and they're all wonderful.
And in the meantime, Wesley Foundation was bonding Jerry Friedman. You didn't even know it. We had Jerry Friedman under the table.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that later. Odd things happen.
Daddy.
Let's see. Margaret and I just came from another panel where we were talking about early days of ComFest, and most especially our debt to sewer on everything. I was one of the lawyers along with Julie's ex,
Bill.
Boyland, and Professor John Quigley that represented Margaret and Jerry and Colin Nyberger, and also Margaret's ex-husband, who turned out to be an FBI informant, John. At any rate, one of my first memories of ComFest is when Rasan Roland Kirk played. And everybody got up on the lawn at Wesley Foundation, and of course there was a lot of party favors in those days. And it was quite a group, and it was a concert like I've never heard before in my life, and not only because he's such an amazing artist, but because of the whole sense of community that existed throughout the crowd during that concert. So I'm definitely in favor of the early ComFest days. I have some reservations about ComFest as it exists today, although naturally I totally support it, and it's a time when a lot of people get to see each other that don't see each other all year, and I think that's one of the beauties of ComFest is that there is this time that you know that you're going to be able to see old friends from the past that come in from out of town, or even live in the city that you don't normally cross paths with.
Don, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but I'd like to ask you guys, back in those days, the ComFest feel was, you know, we're anti-establishment, we're against the war, we're for better race relations, we're special because we're kind of a vanguard of counterculture people. Now today, the Columbus Dispatch and the local TV station say, hey, it's ComFest weekend, everybody come on out. And what I'm interested in what you guys think about that. Is that good or bad or what? I mean, hasn't it lost a we versus them? Maybe that's good, bad, I don't know. What do you think?
I used to be an adjunct professor of political science, and I am also steeped in church history. Every institution begins as some sort of rebellion against the other institutions around it. It starts small, it grows big, and you know what happens? A generation later, another group starts small, becomes big. I'm a Democrat, but I look at the Democratic Party now and I think, oh, geez, I look at Obama, how hard we worked. I was for Hillary at first, then I worked for Obama, and I look now and I think, what's going to happen next here? And it's just the way that social groups always develop. And I think this group has done about as good a job as you could do for a group that's successful. One of the worst things that can happen to a group is it becomes successful. Because as soon as you're successful, you build a building, you put up bricks and mortar and plumbing, and you pay utilities, and you have to call the police when somebody breaks in. So, you start small, but that's the way families work. And those of us, I've been married for 52 years, which is probably rather unusual, but I tell you, you start in marriage, you have no idea what you're getting into 50 years later, Then you end up with all kinds of children and grandchildren, and they rebel against you and hate you and stuff. And some of them love you too. But I mean, every social group goes through that. I think the thing you can do is what ComFest has done, which is try as hard as possible to, in the church, in the Protestant churches at least, they used to say, semper reformandum. You're always in a reformation. Reformation isn't something that happened with Martin Luther in 1517. It's something that continues to happen every Sunday morning. If that doesn't happen, your church is dead. And there's a lot of them that are. But it's the same thing with any group, any festival. Let's not talk religion here, politics, anything else. You become the Democratic Party.
Julie, let me ask you this, and I'm sure in that first year or two, you never envisioned that some corporation would want to co-sponsor, but yet, in recent years, you've had corporations say, hey, can we co-sponsor? And you've said no, right? Why is that? Is that good or bad?
That's the whole reason that I think that the Dispatch is now, saying, oh, it's ComFest time. We refused. We didn't need corporate representation. We were able to do, unfortunately, we had to sell out a little bit by bringing beer in, but we did that about 15 years ago. And it's the beer and the profits that we get from the booths who pay us that make the next festival happen. And so we don't need corporate sponsors. And, I don't think we will, if we were to ever have a corporate sponsor, it wouldn't be ComFest. It just wouldn't, it'd be nationwide, whatever, arena. It'd be, odd lots, or maybe now, instead of values, it'd be odd lots. We don't want that. We don't need that as long as we can generate the funds. And like I said, our values, the values of the festival have never changed. the size the festival has, we still pay no one. We did pay. I think the only time we ever paid anybody was, I think we paid the musician that you talked about, Ross. I think we paid him. We didn't pay Holly Near when she was here. You know, we didn't pay her. But you know, we don't even pay our musicians. What we say is we give them the opportunity to show themselves. So,
And yet you can't escape it completely. You know, there's Coca-Cola is being sold around here, and everything. You know, so you can't escape the fact that we live. You know, I'm looking right now. A building says AEP on it over there. What you gonna do? It's just the world we live in.
Did you envision at the first ComFest that it would be an annual event and it would be going on 37 years later? Did that
We envisioned
cross
an
your mind?
annual event, but nobody ever dreamed of this.
I've got every program from the get-go, and every year it says we're still here. We're still here. You know, we're still here. I want to know if Ian has any memories other than negative ones. I mean,
I envision something more like, you know, if you're a Catholic, your church has a festival every year. I envision something like St. Mary's Festival, you know, Oktoberfest at the Lutheran Church, something like that. But I never thought, you know, that it would be anything like what it is.
I guess my perspective might be a little different than my mom's and her associates, because I was 4 at the first festival. I was at all of them, and at times, my memories are all good. I remember making silkscreen shirts in the attics of these buildings, right over here by the park. I remember stapling the programs together, and I don't want to say it's a life-changing type of thing, but from the get-go, you learn that you were a part of something. And when you asked, hey, why don't I get to go play outside? Why am I in this incredibly hot attic making silkscreen shirts, which actually I begged to do because it's cool. We'd actually tie-dye the shirts. Everything was done by hand, and you felt like you were part of something from the grassroots level, which, you know, 1972, that's when all this grassroots stuff was going on. So I think now, being, you know, in my 40s, I have some perspective on things that maybe a lot of people, you know, my age and younger that come to the festival don't, which was, it's not just, you know, a time to get drunk in the sun and listen to music. It's much bigger than that. It's helping out. I mean, the stuff I was exposed to, I mean, when I was a kid, we were allowed to say the F word, but I've never in my life uttered the N word, because there was a debate between me and Betsy Swoltwater. No, it was Betsy Swoltwater, because we went to my dad, the judge, and her dad, the congressman, and said, hey, what word's worser, I think, was what we asked. And I guess that gives you some idea of the social arena that we were in. And really, in the early 70s, that wasn't commonplace, and it was counterculture. Now it's accepted, thank the Lord. But back then, this whole thing was semi-revolutionary. I mean, I remember the standoffs between police and ComFest people before we got the special police officers there, which ironically were African American. So all my memories were great, and I really do think that experience as a child, I mean, a young child, kind of forms you, you know, in the periphery into who you are and gives you kind of a better perspective on things. And to speak about what ComFest is now, yeah, I'm old enough that I can say, oh, you know, back when I was a kid, let me tell you, this was completely different. You guys don't even know what you're doing. No, but anytime something gets larger, it gets homogenized, and that's just what it is. You've got, if you're bringing in people from certain countercultures and embracing them, it would be completely hypocritical not to embrace, you know, some guys with fraternity t-shirts as well. Because what they're being exposed to, which hopefully they're picking up on more than exposed breasts, is they're gonna learn that, wait, that guy looks different than me, but he's friends with people that look just like me. Maybe that homogenized society I live in my frat house could be, you know, expanded into something like this. And, you know, it's kind of like chipping away at an iceberg. I don't think that anything bad is ever going to come from ComFest, even with the tragedy last night. And I mean,